Right, here we are in part two. So up until now, I've managed to get our Drascombe coaster around the west coast of the Isle of Mull, around the point of Ardnamurchan, and ended up at the anchorage at Gortenfern, which is a thoroughly pleasant place, and ready to start the next phase of this great adventure. I should also mention the desire to minimise outboard usage and just tell you how that's been going. And thus far, I've done rather well. I use the outboard to get out of the marina at Dunstafnage, and since then, the valve on the petrol tank has been screwed shut, and the motor's been nothing more than a dead weight on the back of the boat. Reassuring to have, but it's nice not to have had to have used it. Day 5 ended up as a rather difficult day. I hadn't been particularly ambitious about what I wanted to do this day. The intention was to be in Arisaig on day 6/day 7 to pick up my friend Mark, who's going to be crewing for me for a few days on this trip. So I set myself the job really of just sailing around the rather interesting lochs that are around this corner of the country. There was a very brisk breeze out of the south that was coming across the land and making life really actually quite difficult in the boat. You can't see it too clearly in the first couple of clips here, but in the later ones you might be able to get a bit of an impression. There were some very strong gusts coming off the land, so no big waves or anything, but very hard-edged, sudden onset gusts, which just made keeping things under control rather difficult. You can see in this clip, for example, how the jib luff is really sagging as the mast is being pulled forwards under the strength of this particular gust. Now, okay, I don't think the rig tension had held up as it should have done, but there was an awful lot of creaking and groaning going on in the boat while this was happening. So eventually I pulled into a quietish little bay. It was a real struggle to get into it upwind against these huge gusts with even bigger wind shifts associated with them, and was able to pop the anchor down and take a bit of a breather. It turned out to be an awful lot more interesting than it had any right to be. A very, very, very brisk sail down with the wind coming over the cliffs. Never thought I'd get 6.5 knots out of this thing with a third of a jib and a mizzen. But there we go. You live and learn about these boats, don't you? So it's blind old boots out there at the moment. I'm tucked in here on a rather rocky anchorage, but it'll do for now anyway. It won't make a good overnight spot, I don't think, but the wind's forecast to ease later in the afternoon, so I think I'm just going to take a chill pill and sit and wait it out. After a few hours, I eventually convinced myself that the wind was dropping. It was forecast to, and set off again, really with just the one intention of finding somewhere safe to overnight. The problem was that at each of them, the wind was being funneled down some kind of a valley and made them look at best uncomfortable and at worst the sort of places where you might end up dragging your anchor. So I found myself heading further and further up Lochailort. I felt that if all else failed, Lochailort itself was at 90 degrees to the line of the wind, so should be reasonably sheltered, albeit quite possibly very gusty and fluky. But I could manage that, and all I needed to do was get to the end and drop the anchor in that nice, friendly, inviting mud at the top end. How wrong I was. You can see from the diagram here that what has actually happened was that the wind leading up to the top end of Lochailort basically did a 90-degree right-hand turn and funneled itself down the loch. And it was howling in there. Well, yet another trip that was way more exciting than it needed to be. I didn't feel completely confident overnighting at the place I was at before. So kind of felt that I had to move. And the wind appeared to drop, which it was forecast to do. So decided to head up Lochailort and stop at any convenient looking lay-by that I spot on the way. But knowing that right at the top of Lochailort there's a corner here that should be fairly sheltered and that would dry out tonight because it's high tide right now. And sure enough, there were a couple of good looking lay-bys on the way, but all of them would have meant 100% commitment going in and no chance of coming back out again if they had turned out not to be as good as they looked, on the chart or from several hundred yards out. So I chickened out in every case and ended up coming, say, up to the top of the loch. And my goodness me, was the wind funneling down the loch on the way. It's certainly the windiest I've ever sailed this boat in. A scrap of jib and the mizzen up, and 6.5 knots again. That was fun. So here I am. I kind of tucked the boat in as tight and close to the shore as I could manage, close to the main road as I can manage. It's just downwind of that fish farm up there. I don't think this will dry out. There seems to be enough water underneath that I will at least stay afloat. And I'm not 100% certain of is what the bottom's like here. Maybe when the tide goes out a bit more I'll be able to see, but the alternative is to up the anchor and just sail down to that area down there, which looks reasonably placid. I just wait, I think, until the wind definitely has gone. There's still some fairly gusts, so we'll see. I think here's okay. Maybe down there could be better. We'll see how it goes. The weather the next day couldn't have been more different. Lots and lots of the wet stuff, and not an awful lot at all of the blowy stuff. So it was a bit of a slow drift down Lochailort. Once outside, there was a fair bit more wind, a lot more rain, and a lovely, pleasant uphill slog to the rocks just outside of Arisaig. once through the channel and into Lochailort, I pulled up on the beach at Arisaig, right outside the fish and chip shop. Can't imagine what prompted me to navigate to that particular spot, but that's where I ended up. Let the tide go out, the boat dried out, and I had a slightly lopsided night. So day 7 was entirely spent in Arisaig. I had been truly delighted the previous evening to have just caught the marina staff as they were packing up and leaving for the day. So I was able to grab the combination number for the shower block off them, and was very much looking forward to a hot shower. Sadly, however, I discovered far too late in the day that you need pound coins to use the showers and also the washing machines at Arisaig Marina. So a note for anyone else who wants to go there. So I had to wait another day. Now, my friend Mark turned up the following day, and he's crewing for me now for the next week-ish. So really, we just spent the day pottering around the town and restocking with food and the such like. The other disappointment on the Sunday morning was a lovely gentleman who apparently was not best pleased that I'd parked the boat where I had. Apparently, we're not allowed to park there. So, another note to anyone else who wants to visit Arisaig, that if you want to avoid discussions with grumpy gentlemen, then don't park on the beach. We spent the night on one of Arisaig Marine's moorings, and the next morning set off. I'm intending, if we could, to get to Soay, or at least somewhere quite near it. Not a massive amount of wind, so it took a wee bit of a while to get out of the channel, and there was enough to keep things moving and be a relatively sort of gentle sail for the duration of the morning. A la coaster. The sun came out, the weather warmed up, the breeze filled in. Here we are heading towards Sleat on the Isle of Skye. Unfortunately, Mark wasn't able to enjoy it as much as he'd liked, as he was still feeling unwell. Mal de mer, maybe? Who knows? Smile for the camera. There's a couple of bits of puke on your chin, but apart from that, you'll be fine. Yeah, there isn't. Well, if there is, I can't see him anyway. Eventually, we decided that hammering upwind to Soay was not really going to be on for the day, so we freed off and sailed quite rapidly, actually, up Lochailort, and found ourselves a thoroughly pleasant little anchorage just at the point where the loch narrows, just after a little place called Tochavaig, and anchored there for the night. Once we got into the calmer waters of the loch, Mark started feeling a lot better, so it does tend to imply that mal de mer was the issue. Oddly, we had no recurrence whatsoever for the rest of the week. So yeah, maybe the jury is still out on that one. The next day, with Mark fully recovered, we had probably the best sailing day of the entire trip, albeit upwind, but a fantastic beat all the way up to Soay. We arrived at Soay at the bottom of a spring tide, which basically meant that we couldn't get in. We had to anchor outside and wait for the wait for the harbour to fill up a little bit. Worth noting for anyone who wants to visit this place that the bar at the entrance of the harbour there, as you can see in this clip, it's not an alluvial sand bar like you get at the entrance to many harbours. It's a rocky one, so I wouldn't think it would be a particularly good one to hit. There's a couple of leading marks to help you line up once there is enough water to get over the bar, and once inside, the harbour's very sheltered and really good holding. The next morning was quiet, so we rowed Oa Lis into the old jetty and had a little explore around the remains of the old basking shark fishery that's here in Soay Harbour. And this is what it would have looked like in its day. Tourism bit done, we tootled our way very slowly out the harbour entrance. There was just about enough water for us, with the intention of using what appeared to be a decent southeasterly to take us up to perhaps Lochailort or somewhere like that on the coast of Skye. The issue that we had was that while we were in Soay Harbour, we couldn't get any phone signal, so we weren't able to get an up-to-date weather forecast. We had to wait until we got out of Soay Sound before we could pick up any signal. We got a forecast then, and that implied that the following day it was going to be southeasterly and really windy, and therefore not really very good for getting back to Arisaig from Lochailort, which is where we would need to head to return Mark to his family. So we changed our plans and decided that we would just head on a reach across to Canada. And this is the view from the conservatory window. You can see the breeze is starting to build up. This is getting on towards evening in Canada. And we did actually have a moderately noisy night with the wind. And the next day we decided that we would stick around. So after a leisurely breakfast, we moved Oa Lis up to the shallow end of the harbour where she could dry out between the tides. And we hit the Canna tourist trail. There was quite a big improvement in the weather the next day. The wind had shifted round to the southwest and dropped. Not a massive amount, but it was still quite fresh. Decent bit of sunshine too. So we headed out of Canna, across the Sound of Canna, round the north coast of Rum.
We'll end up jibing accidentally. Maybe actually aim for the yacht.
And once around the top of Rum, we then sailed across the Sound of Rum to clip round the northern edge of Egg. We made the mistake of getting rather too close to the cliffs as we were rounding Egg, so we were directly downwind of them, and there was an awful lot of turbulence coming off of the island, which probably took us a good half hour to get clear of. And during that time, things got quite interesting from time to time, with gusts coming at us from all sorts of directions. Lesson learned for next time, that it's probably better to stand offshore quite a way. Anyway, we ended up at the anchorage at at Egg Harbour, so just by the ferry terminal there. We left Egg on one of those Scottish days that are so typical, just as typical as belting down with rain and blowing half a gale, or belting down with rain and no wind whatsoever. Here we had hot sunshine and very, very little wind. We managed to just drift across the sound from Egg to Arisaig. Eventually, on the Arisaig side, a little bit of wind did fill in, and that helped us up the channel and into the village.
Even its own mother would have to admit that it's ugly.
Once in Arisaig, very mindful of where we were allowed to park and where we're not, we pulled up next to the Marina's slipway and took the opportunity to restock on food, both for the boat and ourselves. A fish and chip supper, followed by, please don't tell the wife about this, but followed by a very nice sticky toffee pudding at the Arisaig Hotel. Really, really hit the spot. And once all that was dealt with, and we were restocked with water as well, we took the boat out to a mooring, and the next day Mark was due to head homewards, and I was set to carry on for the final week.